In 1948, the American psychologist B.F. Skinner published a paper in the Journal of Experimental Psychology in which he reported some unusual behaviour in pigeons. He placed a succession of hungry pigeons inside a cage, delivering food to them at intervals via an automated machine, and observed that the pigeons started repeating actions that had coincided with the delivery of the food, behaving as if their elaborate actions were prompting it to appear, though the food would have appeared at the same intervals whatever they'd done. There are many examples of elaborate human behaviours that are believed by some to have a causal connection with future events, where no such connection exists. In the same year that Skinner published his paper on superstition in pigeons, the psychologist Bertram Forer was conducting a study of a phenomenon in a human superstition, astrology. He gave each of his students a test, followed by a personality analysis, which he told them was based on their test results. Then he asked each of them to rate their analysis for accuracy on a scale of 0 to 5, 5 being the highest. The average rating came out at 4.26. He later revealed that each student had received exactly the same analysis, which had assembled entirely from horoscopes. The Forer effect, that was named after him, refers to people's tendency to be impressed by descriptions like horoscopes that are supposedly tailored specifically for them, but are actually ambiguous and general enough to apply to most people. According to superstition, a wedding ring dangled over the belly of a pregnant woman can predict the baby's gender, a circular motion predicts a girl, a straight pendulum swing predicts a boy. This uses the same mechanism involved in dowsing, the superstitious belief that you can detect water or other substances under the ground with dowsing rods, which actually only work by amplifying small, almost imperceptible movements of the hand. This hand movement is often an unconscious ideomotor effect, whereby a person's expectations lead them to make involuntary movements in line with those expectations. Sometimes dowsing apparatus is even used on maps instead of actual terrain. The symbolic map representation is declared somehow to be endowed with the same detectable energies as the terrain it describes. Wedding ring predictions, dowsing in all its forms, and Ouija board activity have all been attributed to the ideomotor effect, though the person making the involuntary action might be convinced that the movement is coming from elsewhere. Of course, sometimes the hand movements are made quite consciously in a deliberate attempt to fool others. The notion that we can contact spirits through Ouija boards is one of countless superstitions surrounding death, and there are countless television series that seek to give evidence of ghosts and spirit channeling. Viewers send in footage which they claim proves paranormal activity beyond all doubt, but they dismiss without consideration alternative explanations that shine out to the skeptical viewer. Camera crews take on their own investigations, during which dust particles or small insects that catch the light are leapt on as ghostly anomalies, and self-proclaimed mediums declare that they can channel spirits in programs that disclaimers admit are for entertainment purposes only. Interestingly, when magicians give audience members apparently uncannily accurate details about their lives and relationships, our typical response is, "What's their trick?" But when others give the same uncanny details while presenting themselves as spirit channelers or psychic mediums, the response is often, "They must have supernatural powers." All that differs between the two groups is presentation style. If one doesn't require supernatural powers, then neither does the other. The ghost hunting show Most Haunted had been running for 5 seasons before its resident psychic medium Derek Acora was exposed. While filming in Bodmin Jail, Derek behaved as though he was possessed by the spirit of Critica. In fact, this name had been invented, and misinformation about the fictitious spirit had been fed to Derek prior to filming in order to test his integrity. As filming began and Derek became swept up in the persona of the non-existent spirit, he didn't realise that Critica was an anagram of Derek Faker. He also went on to channel the similarly fictitious spirit Rick Eadles, an anagram of Derek Lies. As with death, a great deal of superstition revolves around the treatment of illness, and many want their superstition to be recognised as legitimate medicine. The collective weight of scientific and clinical evidence shows homeopathy to have absolutely no effect beyond placebo. Homeopathic medicines are preparations that have been so diluted that statistically it's unlikely that there's even one molecule of active ingredient present. How do homeopaths justify selling pure water as medicine? They claim that water has a memory of the substances it's been in contact with. The problem with this claim, even if the evidence supported it, which it doesn't, is that the water that the homeopath sells you has been in contact not only with the substance claimed to improve your health, but with thousands of other substances during the time of its natural existence. Also, during the dilution process, any discarded substance is dispersed into the general water supply. By the homeopath's own logic, every glass of water we drink will have had contact at some stage with every substance the homeopath dilutes. So if you want homeopathic medicine at a fraction of the cost, turn on your tap. When I was young, I was told that events and circumstances could be affected by prayer, that the God I was told existed would give help if I asked for it. If nothing happened, I was told I must have prayed for the wrong thing, or didn't pray hard enough, or that my prayer was answered, but in an unexpected way I'd find out about later. I eventually worked out that a world in which a God could move so mysteriously that I had no idea what he'd actually done was identical to a world in which there was no evidence that a God was answering my prayers at all. Alan prays there'll be a parking space when he arrives in town. He finds a parking space. Sarah prays that the son dying in her arms will survive. He doesn't survive. Was the first prayer answered? Or was it too trivial a request to make of a god, and just a fortunate coincidence that Alan got his space? If it's coincidence in this case, why not in others? On what basis do people rule out coincidence? Careful statistical analysis or untested instinct? Was the second prayer simply not answered? Or is the lack of help explained by God having a different plan for Sarah and her son? If God has a different plan, then why pray at all? If a God exists and prayers only work when they agree with the will of that God, and that will is unknown and defies expectation, then praying to a God that exists is no more reliable than praying to a God that doesn't exist. I think the meditation element of prayer can be extremely valuable in focusing your mind on a personal situation that needs your attention. But when, as often happens with gambling, magical or supernatural qualities are assigned to a behaviour, not only is an invalid causal connection made, there's also a risk of that connection establishing itself to the point where it becomes unaffected by consequences. So if the rain dance, gambling bet or prayer gives you the results you want, you go on dancing, gambling or praying. But if they don't give you the desired results, you still go on dancing, gambling or praying until it seems to work again. In this way, you make yourself immune to conflicting evidence, and once that happens, you create a barrier to rational thinking, and you begin to depart from reality. Superstitions can give a comforting illusion of control over circumstances to those who are prone to feeling they have little control in their lives. And many superstitions, like saying bless you when someone sneezes, are rarely meant seriously. I wouldn't want to rob people of their comforts or challenge things which are clearly meant in fun, but I do object to the oppressive effects of superstition, and to people insisting that I should share or support their irrational beliefs. I know someone who's ruled by superstition. Her dramatic gasps of terror when she sees someone putting new shoes on a table or opening an umbrella indoors are designed to make others stop the unlucky behaviour and validate her magical thinking. All her dramatics do for me is remind me how wonderful it feels not to be trapped by the tyrannical, irrational rules that clearly dominate her life. Some people are fond of saying that everyone turns to evidence-free beliefs in times of desperation. That the atheist, for example, will suddenly start believing in a God on their deathbed. Deathbed arguments are rarely based on more than biased anecdotes and conjecture, and at best the only point they make is that sometimes people change their minds. What people choose to believe, in whatever numbers, isn't what establishes the validity of a belief. Perhaps some atheists do convert on their deathbeds, and perhaps some theists stop believing. I was convinced I was going to die a few years ago after a 25-foot fall, and I didn't experience any conversion to theism. The fall knocked me out temporarily, and when I came to, I thought I'd broken my back and I might die. After 4 weeks in traction, I actually made a complete recovery from my hip and spinal fractures, though a head injury left me with post-concussion symptoms that kept me off work for 30 months. But immediately after the impact, as I found myself lying on a small flight of concrete steps and surrounded by broken glass, what I remember most was an immense feeling of calm acceptance for what I thought was possibly the end of my life. There was no panicky scrambling for forgiveness or a God or an afterlife. Apart from what I thought was my impending death, all I was aware of for the longest time was the warmth of the sun, the clear blue sky above me, and a calm appreciation at having lived in a world with so much creativity and intelligence and beauty. When you dispense with superstition, you no longer feel protected by good luck charms, but you also stop worrying about black cats and broken mirrors. Holy water can't bless you, but curses can't harm you either. Not even the power of suggestion will make crystals or echinacea improve your health, but you'll also be less susceptible to psychological and financial exploitation from people offering you false remedies. You'll realise that you can't control people with magic rituals, but also that they can't do the same to you. Perhaps most importantly, responsibility for personal achievements or disgraces can no longer be assigned to good and evil supernatural forces. Instead, it can be clearly understood that people are responsible for their own kindness, cruelty, generosity, meanness, laziness or hard work. Acknowledging responsibility can give you a deeply satisfying sense of genuine self-control, but it does mean admitting and learning from your mistakes. When you follow superstitions, you cease to recognise mistakes because they become built into your whole thought process. Superstition provides excellent excuses for avoiding personal responsibility. After all, if you convince yourself you can conjure up a magic ritual to solve any problem, or rid yourself of guilt for any wrong you do, that's a much easier ride than thinking critically or holding yourself accountable. But if the price is denying reality, becoming fearful of knowledge, being unable to distinguish true and false claims, or being part of a society that trivialises or even condones the violation of others' human rights, then it might be worth considering the possibility that this easy ride will cheat you out of much more than you stand to gain.